Hello, everyone. I'm Kurt Kelly, and I'm back up in the studio here in Tallahassee after our great conference. And we had just a lot of fun at the conference. But one of the things we get to do at the conference is stop and do some recordings of nurturing well-being. And we had a wonderful conversation with Representative Ryan Chamberlin from Ocala, just a fantastic person, a major champion for us in our child welfare world, particularly with the language that we ran last year and some of the stuff that we're going to be working on this year. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. I've specifically brought him on just to talk about, sort of give you a taste of what it means to be a legislator in Florida in challenging times like this, but also working for our agenda, working for much of the stuff that we care about. So I hope you enjoy this episode of Nurturing Wellbeing with Kurt Kelly as we interview Representative Ryan Chamberlin. So I'm just so glad to have you here, brother. And we're going to talk about a few things. I want to start with this legislative session. Now, to our audience, many of you know this because you've heard me talk about this several times, but we ran a major piece of legislation this year. We knew that it was going to be difficult. We knew that it was probably going to take us a couple of years to get this in the right posture to be able to get good policy place. And Representative Chamberlain was, in fact, the champion. We ended up having a work session around this bill, and it was fantastic. It was good to have all the legislators begin to ask the questions and talk about it, and he led the charge on that. And I will tell you, anytime that you're going to run legislation, you better have somebody who's passionate about it and gets the politics. Marco Rubio once says, you can't take politics out of politics. And brother, you were right there. You were with us. So thank you. Welcome. We're glad to have you. I want you to tell me about this session a little bit, highlights,
Sure.
Why we went 105 days or whatever it was. So talk to us about it.
Well, Kurt, thanks so much. And I'm excited to be here. Listen, this session was a remarkable session. I've only been in a few sessions. I'm a fairly new legislator, just started my third year. And this was different than last session, that's for sure. But day 105 of 60, we went over 45 days to get some things done and it ended up coming together, but it took a few extra days. But, you know, if we're going to talk about this session, I'll come back to a bill that you just mentioned a second ago, the piece of legislation that you ran. That was a very interesting, fun, dynamic learning curve for me as a legislator, because when I first heard about the legislation, I read it and everything about it made sense to me. Like this is going to be the easiest bill. This is going to be the easiest bill. Now I know that you prepped me and let me know it wouldn't be, but I'm thinking we should be able to get some movement on this.
This makes sense. This makes sense to do this. Yeah.
And come to find out that even some of the most make sense bills that end up getting passed take a few years to get all the moving parts worked through. And that is what this bill, you know, we set it up that way. You knew it a little bit more than me with your experience. But the learning that I was able to glean, and with this type of bill, you start to feel a little bit of an emotional attachment to the bill because of the good that you believe it can do, the end result of who we're doing all of this for. I know there's the business side to taking care of children, and there's money that's required to take care of children, but then there's the children. And so the end result is we get to do something that will affect real people, real kids. And now we got to flip back on our business side just for a moment, because it does take funding, it takes money, and there's some crises that have been developing to cause problems for this space. And the insurance industry is part of that. And so that's what this legislation was about. I'm excited to bring it back. We may come at it from a whole different angle, but as long as we can move toward getting the end result done, accomplished, then we're winners. We're all winners in that. So what I just shared with you, I couldn't have articulated before I started running this bill this past year. And that's hopefully the way it's going to be every year as a legislator. You'll constantly learn, you'll constantly be a part of new and great ideas, and certainly pick some of those ideas. I did have several bills pass on my own that worked out that were not in this particular silo, so to speak, but you learn how to go through the process, and you learn how to make some adjustments, and you learn how to get it through the House side, through the Senate side. Then ultimately everybody's on pins and needles waiting to see if the governor's what he's going to do with it. And you got to have all three. But It really is a great process. It's an exciting process. And you like to think that in most cases, you end up with a product that is better than what it started with. Not all cases, but you'd like to think in most cases. And then, of course, I get to work with people like you. And you and I, our paths crossed many years ago, but we now are actually working together for the first time, really working together now. Maybe we've supported each other in the past, but we're actually on the phone trying to get things done. And so from a session standpoint, I feel like overall, this was one of those sessions that was probably talked about amongst the Florida citizens more because it was in the news more. I mean, most of the time these sessions kind of come and go, and they're in the news a little bit, but they're not like in the news, daily headline, even on national news. Florida politics was being discussed this particular session. So from that angle, it was different. It was my first experience in turning on Fox News or whatever news channel and hearing something about what was going on in Florida. And I was there, and that wasn't the way I thought it actually happened.
You mean it's exactly reported that same way?
It was not quite. It was interesting experiencing different versions of what the reality really was. And so I did come to realize that, you know, we got to be careful what we believe, whether or not we want to believe everything we hear coming from the mainstream media. That's for sure. But we got through it and we're on the other side of it, but we're already gearing up. This is like a short cycle. Many may not know the Florida legislature runs 60 days a year, supposed to run 60 days a year. And every other year it starts in January and goes till March. And then the opposite year, the non-election cycle year, it starts in March and goes to May. So we just ended in May, or in this case, 45 days after May. And we go back and start preparing just a few months from now for the January session. We start several months before that.
Committee weeks are what? The end of September, 1st of October?
We've got our first 2 committee weeks in October this year.
Okay. Here we are. If we're working on legislation, all of that's being prepped and so forth. Let me also say this. As I work through the halls and I talked to folks and we were talking about the legislation you were running, and we understood there was going to be some challenges. The one thing that when I would tell people who was running it, they all said, "Oh yeah, Ryan Chamberlin he's a quick study. He picks things up quickly." And I noticed that. I'm not just saying that, I'm not just blowing smoke up your dress here, brother. The reality is you had to pick this up because it has been we've been trying to do something in this legislation for 13 years, probably 15 years. And I think we moved the ball forward. We didn't get it passed, but we got it into a point where we had legislators truly, that was one of the most engaging legislative committee hearing that wasn't contentious. It was people were engaging. I'll probably put that down as probably the most engaging because there wasn't going to be a vote that came off of this. And so people could say, I've got a safe space here enough to talk about what I really want to talk about. And it was fantastic. Democrats, Republicans, everybody. So I came out of that meeting there's hope that we can move this language if we craft the right language. It's not going to be our way or the highway. It's not going to be, we have to have this legislation only in our posture. And I think that's what we've been talking about. So being a quick study, but then, and I'll say this, and behind the scenes, like I said, Marco's always said, you can't take politics out of politics, and the political realm, you got to understand how it all works. What was really interesting was people were very complimentary of you taking on this very controversial positions and asking them. And I saw that they like you, man. I can't always say that about me. When I was in the legislature, some people liked me, some people didn't. And that's okay. But the fact is that because you had such an affable way of trying to say, we're going to come to a solution here. And so, and it doesn't have to be this year. It can be next year. Now there's a point in time it has to be. I mean, we have to, and oh, by the way, that was working the House. We still have to go over and work the Senate. What we used to say, the House, the Democrats, I'm a Republican, you're a Republican. When I was there, we used to say the Democrats are the loyal opposition. The Senate was the enemy. I don't say that nowadays. So to you senators, that's not how I feel. But the reality is it was amazing to watch this process take place? What I would tell people is this is one bill you're working. So you had others that you were engaged and so forth. And then you've got what you have 2,300 bills that you had to go look at.
There was a lot. There was
Something
a lot.
like that. And then you hone that down to 190 or 200
Yeah.
that you're going to actually end up voting and, that type of thing and all the amendments that come with it. I don't think people really understand the commitment that being a member of the Florida House or the Florida Senate really is.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the compliments. I wasn't thinking of myself in that way when we were working the bill, but let's come back to that in a second. Florida is a unique state. I now have had the opportunity to meet legislators in other states, and I've had conversations and things have been brought to my attention. And not all states are Florida. Not all states are Florida. When you look at the pure size of the amount of citizens, approaching 25 million, we're at 23 million. We're trending toward
1,200 a day coming to Florida, something like that. Yeah.
That is huge. The economy alone in the state of Florida is massive, equivalent to like one of the top 15 countries in the world, just the Florida economy. When you look at just saying that statement, what goes with that statement is there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts that go on. So a legislator's job, we're going to hear a lot of different ideas, a lot of different problems. When you have a great state, I don't like to think of it as problems, but you're constantly trying to come up with solutions to make it better. So you're trying to solve things that need to be solved. And we get to hear a lot of different things. So this bill was no different. If now that you've said what you've said, if I look back and say, okay, well, why would people be saying anything like that? In my mind, it's because I really did not come at that bill like I knew everything and I had all the solutions and here's the way it needs to be done. I felt like we had a solution, but we came at it knowing that it probably wasn't going to be received by everybody. We wouldn't get everything we wanted, but here's the talking point. So we came in the beginning. The good part is we had somewhat of a story to tell from day one. That story was engaging because we weren't attacking anybody necessarily that we were talking to. We were asking for opinions, for ideas and engagement. And when people gave us something good to run on, we ran with it. And I find already as a legislator, when you're communicating about your bills and you're talking to other people that may or may not agree with everything you're doing, if they have a little input and there's just some nugget of that they offer that makes sense, and you can highlight something that does make sense that maybe the opposition would offer, whether they go with the bill or not, they start to buy into what you're doing because they can see that you're after the win. The win is a solution that's better for Florida. At the end of the day, your bill is something that we have to address this issue to keep things moving forward with what that bill was trying to accomplish. And that is something that all Floridians will get behind when they hear. They don't want anything devastating to happen to childcare and in that whole space. So my approach was just to have honest conversations and not argue about anything, but try to just keep it back to, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? That seemed to work with this bill.
And what I saw, and I watched folks from all sides of this, we have Republicans that are not going to necessarily agree with the solution that we came up with last year. And that's fair. And what I found was, then talk to us. Tell us we've got a problem. We've got the best system of care for community-based care in the United States. Last night I was at dinner with some folks from the great state of Virginia, and they were just amazing. In fact, they actually brought one of the deputy secretary was having dinner with a group of us, and we were going through and talking about some of the things. And they want to be like Florida. And I told them, I said, no, I want you to be better than us. Learn from what our mistakes are. But we have a system of care that engages communities in a way that no other state does. So we've got other states trying to emulate what we do. I agree. They're not all like Florida. And in this area, we got it right. Now, we've been around 20 years. We also have to look at things that may cause to degrade the very thing. Insurance is one of them. So there's some unintended consequences that are coming into play. And if we don't address it, the very good system of care. When it comes on most of the key indicators of what we do in child welfare, child protection, Florida's number one. Whether it be adoptions, I got one lead agency in the Panhandle. This whole lead agency that did more adoption. They did basically 1% of all the adoptions in the entire United States. Just the 18 counties in the Panhandle. That's an amazing stat. And you never see them get credit for this or anything, but they do amazing work. How do we learn from that? Well, that's what our model sets up. It allows us to work for it. And Ocala is different than Miami, and it's different than Pensacola. That community-based care model was put into place. It's got a lot of strength. I think we have to continue to get better, but we also have to look at the barriers, and this insurance happens to be one of them. So the fact that you've stopped and addressed it and are addressing it, it's really important.
And I appreciate that. Listen, as a legislator, a lot of the things we get credit for are ideas that come from people like you and others. So I appreciate getting credit, but the reality is this was brought to me. I'm in a position to work it the way we did. And together as a team, it's one of the few bills that probably had a lot of controversy attached to it, that only one of a few that ended up getting put into a specific workshop of its own.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it just doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't happen.
I don't know that the entire time I've been here, that was the first time I'd seen it happen. And it may have happened a couple of times.
I don't think I've seen it happen like that much, right?
What was neat about that is what you said earlier, is because there was no particular vote on a bill, but it was ran as if it was a bill. It allowed people to ask questions without the pressure. And so I presented 3 or 4 minutes worth of initial information. And then we went for almost an hour of back and forth questions from all sides, all types, all thought processes, to where the end result was we are exploring a topic that hadn't been explored amongst the legislature that particular way. And it was the beginning of change, beginning of improvement.
That's a great way of putting it. The beginning, and even in that committee, I mean, I'm sitting out in the audience watching. I really had no intention of speaking, and they invited me to come up. Okay, so I'm up there, and now we're asking questions. Great ideas were being thrown out there. So it was all of that. Suffice it to say, is set the table for future results. We know we got to do something. So there's a possibility of a couple of options. And frankly, what I'd like to do is I'd like to get the groups that are insurance companies, trial bars, all of these different, our folks, and basically bring them to a point. I don't know, you're not gonna have a kumbaya, but bring them to the point where they all say, we've got to make sure we protect this model that's done such good work. Because I do say this, just as I was with the folks from Virginia last night, they want to be like us. They kept saying, we want to see what your model. They literally sent one of the key legislators. She and I sat together and we're talking, and she says, "Oh, I just wish we could do this." And I said, "You can. Here's going to be the pain points, but learn from us. See, if we'd have done this in the early on, we could have probably addressed this before it got out of hand. We could have probably put some things in place that would have dealt with it." So, first of all, thank you. And you're right. I'm asking you to come in and get up to speed like that, and it doesn't happen. Well, you're up to speed now, and you are now. We had a pre-meeting here, just looking at some opportunities for the future. But besides this, what else do you want to accomplish? Talk to me about what you're looking at this coming year, if you can, or if you'd like to. What do you think? What are some things that you just want to tell our audience?
Well, certainly, a couple of years ago, one of the first bills that I filed was a bill to propose the elimination of property taxes in the state of Florida. And that was a big idea, a big bill. This was a few years ago. But that bill, if you've paid attention to the news, property tax has been a discussion now amongst the House. Now, I'm not taking credit for that idea, because there's been lots of people that over the years, it just hasn't been an aggressive conversation in the Florida legislature for quite a while. And it is now a conversation that is happening at a very high rate with a lot of different voices. It's a big solution, big problem, big solution. And it's not something I believe will get fixed overnight. I believe there's improvements that can happen very rapidly, and I think we'll see some improvements here quickly. You've heard our governor speaking on property taxes, but you asked me some things I'm working on. I'm deep diving into property taxes in the state of Florida right now, especially on the house side. I am working with a group called inpropertytaxnow.com, and we're about to do a series of interviews with different people all across the state. I'm meeting with property appraisers. I'm meeting with commissioners. I'm having meetings already because I want to understand it. In my mind, I'm hopefully taking the same type of approach that I took with the bill we were just talking about. Let's get all the conversations on the table. Let's get everyone stop saying it can't be done. That's part of the process, Kurt, is getting people to the point where they stop saying something can't be done and what are some ideas on how it could be. Not that we're going to go there, but we got to get that shift in the conversation. And that's what's happening with your topic that we worked on this year. Property tax is a big one, and it may take years to really do exactly what we want. But I think changing how the current property tax system is in the state of Florida could be record breaking.
It's actually changing the entire tax system.
It really is.
Because, I served on a school board and I know the county commissions, and the legislature really doesn't mess with property taxes. It doesn't affect you. Your sales tax for the most part. And locals have some sales tax, but the big portion of theirs is property tax. So, and by the way, philosophically, I agree that because I can own my home and still I could lose it.
Yeah.
Why? Because I can't afford to pay the property tax, or if it can go up. And we saw this actually 15 years ago. We had a long conversation about it, and it was really exacerbated in Miami and so forth. But in Ocala, where I was, it wasn't a big problem. It's becoming a problem everywhere. But the question is then, how do you fund the local? So that would be part of the solution. Yeah. Yes, and you got to bring them in.
There's several ideas on that are floating right now. And again, if people will kind of tap into some specific words I'm using right now, and that is change property tax as we know it.
Right.
When someone buys a piece of property, I'm not opposed to that being taxed. That's a tax on a transaction. I'm opposed to them being taxed the rest of their life on that purchase they made and them having to pay taxes 50, 60 years and it's never paid for. They're renting their property from the government. So how we think about property taxes, can we get creative with how we generate the $50 billion that property tax brought in to our local communities? No one's going to make an adjustment to this system without making sure police departments, schools, fire departments are all well funded. I like to fund them more. So I'm pro all those organizations, but I do think there's still a lot of waste that can be cut. And by the time we get done, the popular word would be doging the state. There might be $10 billion laying out there that's being wasted. And we're looking at all of that. However, we also have things like in the state of Florida, we have 140 million people that travel here every year that aren't going to stop traveling here, and yet they're not helping pay any property taxes. And we've seen our property taxes double and triple. They've actually gone up on average over 40% across the counties. And the last thing I'll tell you about property taxes is this: we have 67 counties, almost late high 40s, close to 50 most of those counties don't collect enough revenue with the current system to fund the things that we're talking about. So to me, the way it's set up is just not working. A new solution, what currently was created and the mindset it was created in an entirely different state. The state of Florida is a totally different state today than it was even 20 or 30 years ago. It needs different solutions. So I think there's a creative solution that can be brought to the table that would, be great for Floridians, and it would be smarter than having people rent their property for the rest of their life.
See, I think what you just said, what an honor to actually have this conversation, because it's a dangerous conversation, because the knee-jerk reaction to inertia. Okay, we can't change it. This is the way it's always been. This is the way my granddaddy did it. And to say maybe there is a better way. Maybe there's a better way, and I don't have the answer to this.
No, we should at least discuss it.
But you should at least have the conversation. This is the thing that I think that good government does, is have those conversations. And you bring different groups in. You bring the school board associations in, and you talk to them about Because again, probably their knee-jerk reaction is, wait a second, that's 60% of our revenue that we get. I get some from Fed and I get some from state, and you guys keep putting all these rules and regulations. I remember all the arguments, but it's worth having the conversation. Is there a better way? Is there a more modern way? Do we modernize our process so that it better meets the need of this generation and secures the blessing for ourselves and our posterity? I remember, again, I go back to Marco Rubio. He used to make some pretty smart statements. I like the guy. And he made the comment about what was happening in South Florida. And he was talking about his grandmother has a home, but she's paid it off, and she could lose that home. It's you made a comment, use that terminology. It's like renting it. And I get it. And that would happen if you don't pay your tax bill, if you were to run into something of that nature. So there's other ways that obviously sales tax has some advantages, has some disadvantages. Yeah. Tourism taxes have some advantages, have some disadvantages. But I think all of that's worth the conversation. Now, here's what I wanted to say to you. Wow, that's courage. I love people who are willing to take very controversial areas and bring it in and say, let's discuss it. Let's not turn it into knee-jerk politics yet. Now, again, a lot of times don't talk about it because we don't want to talk about it at all. Okay, because we don't keep. I like the fact that we should. And when it comes to funding and things like that, I think that it has to happen. So good luck with that, because that's going to be
It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
And I like the way you said it can be fun. I addressed some legislation when I came in that I thought, oh man, everybody's going to be for this, and found out it was big time controversy. We had a prescription drug bill that I put forth, and I was running it with the governor's office. I could not believe I had people, even in my own party, that were opposed to that. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I got their perspective though, and I understood it. And then it's just a matter of convincing people of the right solutions. And so that's a couple of year process, if that, and you'll get a few scars on your back by doing it.
Right. We'll learn a lot too. And at the end of the day, you said it just a second ago, what people are wondering is, where are they getting the funding that they need to do the things that they need to do? And as we come up with those solutions, it takes the stress out of the conversation. Now we just have to come up with a better model, but we do have to secure the things that are important to all of us. One thing I will say about my colleagues in Florida, and I'll say this about most of them, maybe all of them, the people I'm working with up there want this state to keep getting better. They come at it in a different way, but at least they're not going up there. They're not taking this time out of their life to go up there to intentionally try to make Florida a worse state. We want it to be the best state. We believe it is the best state. We want to keep it there, but to be the best, you've got to keep, now we're going after some big ideas and let's do some things that haven't been done. I feel like it could set the pace, just like your legislation could set the pace and an example for the rest of the country to show an improvement in that area. That's the kind of things we're working on. So thanks for having this discussion with me today.
And we could continue this. You and I could sit here and probably talk for the next 3 hours. And the reality is, but I want folks, as you're watching this, to understand the commitment that every legislator makes when they come into this. Some make it more than others, but many of them, they put their businesses pretty much on hold. You're 60 days in that environment and you don't get to get out of there. You received one of our major awards that we provide for our legislator of the year. It was not a light decision to make this, but the way that you've addressed legislation that helped us, we could do nothing but recognize you. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for your service. And I'll tell you what, we'll commit to coming back and talking about some of this in the future. We'll have you in our studio in Tallahassee. With that, God bless you, brother. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.